Every standard begins unseen, in fragments, in motion. It aligns, it connects, it takes form. Then it responds to purpose, to direction. Refined, tested, strengthened over time. Shaped with precision. Until it becomes complete. Perfected to lead. A mark of trust, a symbol of excellence. Your strategic partner in quality assurance and compliance.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam Malaysia Madani. Yang berusaha Encik Ahmad Razi Abdul Rahim, Ketua Penolong Pengarah Bahagian Standardisasi Jabatan Standard Malaysia. Yang berusaha Profesor Madya Dr. Zelina Zaitun Ibrahim, Pengerusi Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal Berkenaan Climate Change NSC 26 TC7. Yang berusaha Teknologi Scuba Neswari Ramasami, Pengarah Urusan Global Tunikara Sendian Berhad, Perangkap Timbalan Pengerusi Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal Berkenaan Climate Change NSC 26 TC7. Dan para hadirin sekalian yang dihormati, saya Faizul Hakim bin Abdul Manaf selaku pengacara majlis pada hari ini mewakili pihak penganjur Jabatan Standard Malaysia ingin mengucapkan selamat datang ke sesi konsultasi kebangsaan Draft International Standard ISO D 14060 Net Zero Aligned Organization. Para hadirin yang dihormati, untuk makluman, sesi konsultasi ini dianjurkan bagi memberikan penerangan kepada umum berkenaan ISO D 14060 Net Zero Aligned Organization yang kini sedang melalui proses undian di peringkat antarabangsa ISO. Melalui sesi ini, pihak yang berkepentingan berpeluang mendapatkan penjelasan daripada pakar yang terlibat secara langsung dalam pembangunan standard di peringkat ISO, di samping memahami perubahan dan keperluan dicadangkan dalam ISO D 14060. Sesi ini juga merupakan platform yang untuk pihak berkepentingan mengemukakan pandangan dan ulasan terhadap draft tersebut. Input dan pandangan yang diterima akan membantu memastikan kepentingan serta input Malaysia dapat dipertimbangkan dalam proses pembangunan dan pemuktamatan standard antarabangsa berkenaan. Tuan-puan yang dikehendaki untuk melengkapkan borang pendaftaran kehadiran melalui pautan yang dikemukakan atau dikongsikan oleh pihak Sekretariat JSM di ruangan checkbox. Melalui pautan tersebut, tuan-puan juga boleh mengemukakan syarat sebarang pertanyaan, kemusykilan atau perkara yang memerlukan penjelasan berkaitan dokumen ISO D 14060. Semua pertanyaan yang diterima akan direkodkan dan disenaraikan untuk diberikan maklum balas secara rasmi. Maklum balas tersebut kemudiannya akan diemailkan kepada semua peserta yang hadir. Selain itu, sekiranya tuan-puan ingin mengemukakan komen atau ulasan teknikal terhadap ISO D 14060, tuan-puan dipersilakan untuk melengkapkan borang komen yang turut borang komen melalui pautan Google Form yang turut disediakan oleh pihak Sekretariat di ruangan checkbox. Perlu diingatkan bahawa tarikh penghantaran borang dokumen adalah pada 25 Ogos 2026. Untuk makluman jua, tiada sijil penyertaan akan disediakan bagi sesi konsultasi ini. Selain itu, memandangkan sesi ini disiarkan secara langsung, pihak kami ingin menjemput tuan-puan untuk menekan butang langgan subscribe saluran YouTube rasmi Jabatan Standard Malaysia bagi mengikuti video-video yang disediakan dari semasa ke semasa. Sokongan tuan-puan dalam menyokong saluran YouTube rasmi kami ini amatlah kami hargai. Hadirin sekalian, sesi
Boleh. Minta maaf tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, kita sama-sama masalah teknikal sikit. Saya teruskan dengan sedikit mengenai tajuk kita pada pagi ini, iaitu perubahan iklim dan usaha mencapai net zero kini bukan lagi merupakan agenda alam sekitar semata-mata. Ia semakin mempunyai kaitan langsung dengan daya saing industri, pelaburan, perdagangan, rantai bekalan serta pembangunan ekonomi sesebuah negara. Dalam konteks ini, standard mempunyai peranan yang penting. Standard menyediakan satu rujukan yang dipersetujui bersama bagi memastikan pendekatan, istilah, keperluan dan amalan dapat dilaksanakan secara lebih konsisten, telus dan dipercayai. Sedikit mengenai Jabatan Standard Malaysia ataupun JSM adalah badan standard kebangsaan mempunyai tanggungjawab menyelaras dan pembangunan dan pelaksanaan aktiviti standardisasi negara melalui sistem standardisasi kebangsaan. Namun begitu, peranan JSM tidak terhad kepada pembangunan Malaysian Standard sahaja. Malaysia turut terlibat secara aktif dalam aktiviti standardisasi di peringkat antarabangsa, khususnya melalui ISO. Pelibatan ini membolehkan Malaysia bukan sahaja mengikuti perkembangan standard antarabangsa, malah turut menyumbang kepakaran, pengalaman dan pandangan nasional dalam proses pembangunan standard tersebut. Ini merupakan satu aspek yang penting. Sebagai sebuah negara yang mempunyai pelbagai sektor ekonomi dan industri, Malaysia perlu memastikan bahawa perspektif dan realiti tempatan turut diambil kira dalam pembangunan standard yang berpotensi digunakan secara meluas di peringkat global. Dalam hal ini, pelibatan stakeholders amat diperlukan. Draft ISO DIS 14060 berkaitan dengan net zero aligned organisation merupakan antara perkembangan penting dalam usaha menyediakan pendekatan yang lebih konsisten berstruktur bagi organisasi dalam menyelaras strategi, sasaran dan tindakan mereka ke arah net zero. Justru sesi konsultasi pada hari ini bukan sekadar untuk beri penerangan mengenai dokumen ISO, sebaliknya ia merupakan satu platform untuk kita meneliti, menilai dan memberi pandangan terhadap draft Malaysian Standard tersebut. Di sini juga saya menekankan bahawa kekuatan sistem standardisasi terletak pada proses pembangunan yang berasaskan kepakaran, penyertaan dan konsensus. Pandangan daripada semua yang terlibat pada pagi ini amat penting bagi memastikan pendirian Malaysia dikemukakan dalam proses ISO benar-benar mencerminkan kepelbagaian kepentingan serta realiti pelaksanaan di negara kita. Akhir sekali, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, saya berharap sesi pada pagi ini dapat dimanfaatkan sepenuhnya oleh semua peserta untuk berkongsi kepakaran dan pandangan secara konstruktif. Lebih penting, saya berharap penglibatan kita dalam proses ini dapat memperkukuh lagi kedudukan Malaysia sebagai sebuah negara yang bukan sahaja menggunakan pakai standard antarabangsa tetapi turut menyumbang kepada pembentukan standard tersebut. Akhir kata, saya merakamkan penghargaan kepada semua ahli dan juga pengurusi NEC 26 TC7 dan juga urus dia di Jabatan Standard Malaysia bagi menjayakan sesi konsultasi pada hari ini. Okey, sekian, terima kasih. Balik pada Cik Faizul.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada yang berusaha, Encik Ahmad Razif Abdul Rahim, di atas ucapan pembukaan sebentar tadi. Kita teruskan lagi dengan ucapan alu-aluan oleh yang berusaha Profesor Madya Dr. Zalina Zaitun Ibrahim yang merupakan pengurusi bagi Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal berkenaan Climate Change NSC 26 TC7. Yang berusaha Profesor Madya juga terlibat aktif di peringkat antarabangsa dengan mewakili Malaysia sebagai pakar di dalam ISO TC 207 SC7 Greenhouse and Climate Change Management Related Activities. Dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Tuan Kerusi Majlis. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Yang berusaha Encik Ahmad Razif Abdul Rahim, Ketua Penolong Pengarah Bahagian Standardisasi Jabatan Standard Malaysia. Yang berusaha Teknologis Purvaneswari Ramasamy, Pengarah Global Tunikara Sendirian Berhad, merangkap Timbalan Pengurusi Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal berkenaan Climate Change NSC 26 TC7 dan penceramah pakar kita pada hari ini. Ahli Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal, Wakil Kementerian dan Agensi Kerajaan, Wakil Industri, Akademia, Badan Profesional, Pertubuhan Bukan Kerajaan dan para peserta webinar yang dihormati sekalian. Saya mengalu-alukan kehadiran dan penglibatan semua peserta dalam sesi konsultasi pada hari ini. Dan saya merakamkan penghargaan atas kesediaan semua pihak untuk berkongsi pandangan dan kepakaran masing-masing. Adalah amat penting untuk kami mendapat kepelbagaian perspektif dalam membantu Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal meneliti Draft International Standard ISO DIS 14060 ini secara lebih menyeluruh. Hadirin sekalian, antara peranan utama Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal 7 Climate Change di bawah NSC 26 adalah untuk menyokong aktiviti standardisasi dalam bidang berkaitan perubahan iklim, termasuk mengikuti perkembangan standard antarabangsa dan juga meneliti dokumen teknikal yang berkaitan serta mendapat pandangan stakeholders bagi membentuk pendirian Malaysia. Dokumen ISO DIS 14060 Net Zero Aligned Organizations yang akan kita bincangkan hari ini adalah dalam peringkat pembangunan iaitu ianya adalah pada peringkat Draft International Standard atau DIS. Dokumen ini berpotensi menjadi bahan rujukan kepada organisasi dalam perjalanan mereka ke arah mencapai status net zero. Terutamanya kerana Malaysia sendiri telah membuatkan deklarasi bahawa negara berhasrat mencapai status net zero menjelang tahun 2050. Dalam proses pembangunan dokumen ini, negara-negara ahli ISO diminta perhatikan dokumen DIS dan memberi ulasan melalui proses ballot. Ballot bagi ISO DIS 14060 telah dibuka pada 17 Jun 2026 dan akan ditutup pada 9 September 2026. Tempoh ini memberikan ruang kepada negara anggota ISO untuk meneliti kandungan draft tersebut dan mengemukakan pandangan serta komen melalui mekanisme yang telah ditetapkan. Let's briefly take a look at the scope of the standard. Ms. Purva will go into further depth later. So, the scope is specifying principles, requirements, guidance for organizations to develop, implement, and communicate a net zero aligned pathway. This includes the listing that you see, targets, plans, actions, and verifiable progress. The claims that can be made are 4. Net zero aspiration, net zero aligned transition plan, net zero aligned progress, or achievement of net zero. Who is the standard for? It is applicable to a wide range of organizations, but does not apply to territories, or it's not by sectors. And what are some other considerations? It is developed primarily for non-financial institutions because ISO already has another standard, sustainable finance, net zero transition planning for financial institutions. But this document can be applied by financial institutions for non-financing activities. The standard is program neutral. It doesn't matter what program you are using. And for SMEs, there is an Annex A to provide guidance. The standard also refers to some other existing standards. For example, the Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, Financial Institutions Net Zero Standard, as well as the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financial Global Accounting and Reporting Standard. Justru saya ingin menekankan bahawa input daripada stakeholders Malaysia amat diperlukan. Kita perlu memberi maklum balas kerana pertama adalah untuk memastikan kandungan standard adalah jelas, konsisten dan kukuh dari sudut teknikal. Kedua adalah untuk menilai sama ada keperluan dalam dokumen yang dicadangkan adalah praktikal dan boleh dilaksanakan oleh organisasi dengan mengambil kira kepelbagaian saiz sektor dan kapasiti organisasi. Yang ketiga adalah untuk memastikan bahawa aspek-aspek yang mempunyai kaitan dengan konteks dan realiti di Malaysia dapat dikenal pasti dan dipertimbangkan dalam proses pembentukan pendirian nasional. Dalam semakan dokumen tersebut, saya syorkan tuan-puan untuk meneliti syarat wajib. Syarat wajib yang terkandung dalam ayat yang mengandungi perkataan shall. Jadi jika tuan-puan ada dokumen ini, tuan-puan boleh mencari perkataan shall yang menelitikan perkara yang wajib mesti dilakukan. Pastikan bahawa syarat wajib tersebut akan dapat dilaksanakan oleh pihak tuan-puan dalam masa tempoh yang diberikan. Pertimbangkanlah ya jika pihak tuan dapat mengerti syarat tersebut. Dalam memberikan maklum balas, saya menggalakkan para peserta supaya memberi ulasan yang produktif. akan perubahan yang diperlukan dan bukan hanya menyatakan sama ada bersetuju atau tidak bersetuju dengan sesuatu peruntukan atau klausul. Pada mana-mana isu atau cadangan yang dikenal pasti adalah sangat membantu sekiranya pandangan tersebut disertakan dengan justifikasi teknikal, pengalaman pelaksanaan, implikasi terhadap organisasi bersama dengan cadangan penambahbaikan pada teks dokumen tersebut. Dengan cara ini, input yang diterima dapat dinilai dengan lebih berkesan oleh jawatan kuasa teknikal dan seterusnya menyumbang kepada pembentukan pendirian Malaysia. Para hadirin yang saya hormati, sesi pada hari ini juga merupakan peluang untuk kita melihat draft tersebut daripada pelbagai perspektif. Sama ada dari sudut dasar, industri, teknikal, akademia maupun pelaksanaan di lapangan. Saya percaya kepelbagian perspektif inilah yang akan menjadikan proses konsultasi kita lebih bermakna. Apa yang kita lakukan pada hari ini bukan semata-mata memberikan komen terhadap sebuah dokumen ISO. Kita sedang membantu membentuk suara Malaysia dalam pembangunan satu standard antarabangsa. Sehubung itu, saya berharap sesi pada hari ini dapat memberikan kefahaman yang jelas mengenai kandungan dan keperluan ISO DIS 14060 serta membantu peserta mengenal pasti perkara-perkara yang memerlukan penelitian atau penjelasan lanjut. Sebarang komen dan cadangan yang dikenal pasti melalui sesi ini seterusnya akan diteliti oleh jawatan kuasa teknikal dalam proses penyediaan respons Malaysia terhadap DIS. Semua komen daripada negara ahli ISO akan dibawa bincang di peringkat jawatan kuasa kerja antarabangsa ISO yang ditugaskan untuk bangunkan dokumen ini. Malaysia akan melantik pakar kepada jawatan kuasa Malaysia akan melantik pakar kepada jawatan kuasa kerja tersebut dan salah satu pakar kami iaitu teknologis Pankova akan memberi penerangan berkaitan standard pada hari ini. Akhir kata, saya merakamkan penghargaan kepada Jabatan Standard Malaysia, ahli-ahli jawatan kuasa teknikal, para pakar serta semua stakeholders yang telah memberikan komitmen dalam proses ini. Seterusnya semoga sesi konsultasi pada hari ini akan dapat menghasilkan pandangan yang bernilai dan seterusnya menyumbang kepada pembentukan pendirian Malaysia yang kukuh dalam proses pembangunan ISO DIS 14060. Sekian, terima kasih. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Yang Berusaha Dr. Zelina Zaitun Ibrahim di atas ucapan alu-aluan sebentar tadi. Hadirin sekalian, bagi meneruskan program ini, sesi akan diteruskan dengan pembentangan mengenai ISO DIS 14060 Net Zero Aligned Organisation yang akan disampaikan oleh Yang Berusaha Teknologis Pubaneswari Ramasami yang merupakan Timbalan Pengurusi Jawatan Kuasa Teknikal Berkenaan Climate Change NSC 26 TC7. Yang Berusaha Teknologis Pubaneswari merupakan pakar dalam bidang teknologi hijau dan perubahan iklim dengan berpengalaman lebih 30 tahun dalam inovasi, foresight teknologi, perkomersialan, kerjasama strategik awam swasta dan pengurusan projek. Beliau memainkan peranan penting dalam memacu penerapan teknologi hijau di Malaysia melalui pelaksanaan inisiatif perintis khidmat nasihat dasar kepada agensi kerajaan, penglibatan industri dan pembangunan kapasiti. Beliau turut terlibat secara aktif dalam pelbagai mesyuarat dan inisiatif berkaitan perubahan iklim di peringkat antarabangsa dan kebangsaan, termasuk dalam bidang pengiraan dan pelaporan GHG, piawaian net zero serta pengharmonian GHG protokol dan ISO. Beliau juga mempunyai pengalaman dalam menyumbang kepada pembangunan beberapa dasar, antaranya National Carbon Market Policy, Forest Carbon Offset, Renewable Energy Technology Roadmap dan Waste Management Policy. Pada masa ini, beliau merupakan Managing Director di Global Tunikara Sendian Berhad. Global, seterusnya sebagai Director di Global Group of Companies dan serta pengerusi Polisi Subkomiti MCMA. Dengan segala hormatnya, majlis mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Teknologis Ubaneswari Ramasamy.
Terima kasih Encik Faizul. Terima kasih para hadirin yang hadiri sesi konsultasi hari ini. Memandangkan kebanyakan daripada terma-terma yang terlibat dalam pembangunan dokumen ini adalah dalam bahasa Inggeris, so saya akan berucap dalam bahasa Inggeris seterusnya. As an introduction, the ISO launched the public consultation for the ISO Net Zero Aligned Organizations Standard, or ISO/DIS 14060 on 17 June this year, ahead of the London Climate Action Week. This is considered to be the world's first international independent verifiable standard designed to support organizations in developing credible and comprehensive net zero transition plan. The draft of the international standard is being made for a 12-week consultation period to ISO national members in more than 170 countries to establish national consensus position by early September. During the WG meetings in Toronto last year, I had the benefit of working together with some of the other experts, including Nigel Lehan, who is the convener, Delia Matt Cohen, who is the Australian expert, Jessica Matthew, the BSI UK, as well as Kaya Excelson, and also our neighboring country, actually SG Enterprise, represented by Cheong Tak Leong, and among others in establishing this document. So the agenda for this today's briefing will be covering the development process of ISO 14060 standard, introduction to the ISO, overview of the ISO 14060, and also the snapshot of ISO 14060 starting from clause 4 to 16, where a lot of details are. Sorry, the slides. Snapshot of ISO 14060, and then the guidance to small and medium-sized enterprises, which would be in the Annex 1, and key takeaway for organizations. The document builds upon existing international standard sorry, there is an adjusting in terms of the slide movement. Okay. So the document builds upon existing international standard addressing GHG quantification, reporting, verification and validation such as ISO 14064-1 established in 2018 and ISO 14064-2 2019, ISO 14064-3 2019 and ISO 14067 2018. At the time of publication, important standards of relevance to this document are undergoing revision and alignment in between ISO and GHGP, who has formed a partnership to co-developing harmonized core brand in standards and quantification and reporting of GHG emission and removal at organizational level. This includes 14064-124 together with GHGP corporate accounting and reporting standards, GHGP Scope 2 guidance, as well as GHGP Scope 3 standards. This document sets out an approach different to ISO 14068, which established an approach for organizations to use carbon credit to make claims for carbon neutrality during transition based on offsetting their carbon footprint. So what exactly is the ISO 14060? It's a basis for organization to demonstrate credible, verifiable progress towards a net zero. The requirement is based on ISO net zero guidelines. It's interoperable with key GHG accounting reporting standards, anchored via normative reference to core ISO and GHGP standards. It sits along with ISO 14068. So the objective of this standard is to meet the needs of all organizations and align with the Paris Agreement. The underpinning principle is basically there are 11, but here I only recap urgency, high ambition, equity, and justice. The governance level and the next step is the consensus-based, and it's a wide range of stakeholders involved, NSBs, coordinating national inputs. Comments need a rational and proposed text of specific deletions. Supportive comments are welcome. And once the comments are received, NSB will synthesize and submit comments. Then the WG meetings, which will be held in Q4 2026, will actually discuss these comments and then prepare for the final draft. For this standard, it actually has started since 2024, which is almost 2 years now, and it involves almost 15 WG meetings held in various parts of the world, and 300 plus members has been involved, and almost 5,000 comments has been received throughout this period. As an introduction to the ISO DIS 14064 Net Zero Aligned Organization, it covers all aspects of climate action towards net zero and also allow for claims. The intended users are all type and sizes of organization, but recognitions that financial institution and SME may not fully in use themselves. The structure of the document follows ISO convention. For more guideline, can refer to the DIS guideline documents for discussion of main topics. And the ISO conventions are concise and precise definition of key terms taken from other standards where possible. So the important definition basically covers the mainly two, which of course there are many more, but the main two is to differentiate between the organizational net zero, which covers the condition in which anthropogenic GHG emission within organizations' GHG emission has been reduced to residual emission within a specified period, against global net zero, in which the condition in which anthropogenic GHG emission are balanced by anthropogenic GHG removal over a specified period at global level. So for the document content, the description covers almost 91 pages, and we have the page 1 to 6 where it covers the introduction, and page in Roman page 1 to 4, and then in normal pages is 1 to 11. It covers the scope, terms, and principle. Page 12 to 18 about the core requirement, and annexes in page 51 onwards. So in the first part, where the introduction, it talks about the climate rationals, the alignment with GHGP core branding efforts, relationship to ISO 14061-68 related to the carbon neutrality. The clause 3 of the clause 1 to 2, which covers in the page 1 to 12, covers the applicable organization and exclusion territories and sectors, which covered by Dr. Zalina earlier. References are made to the normative references such as ISO 14064 series and GHGP standards. The clause 3, some of the terms include global carbon budgets, interim targets, net zero pathway, etc. Whereas in clause 4, guiding principles such as urgency, credibility, and transparency, among other materials. So in annexes, it provide guidance to SME, emission setting, additional guidance for GHG mitigation action, organizational GHG budget, allocation method, net zero pathway based on sector and locations, setting GHG reduction targets, and reduction targets for individual GHG. As an overview of the this initiative, the Paris 2015 Paris Agreement recognizes that achieving the long-term temperature goal will require reaching a global balance between anthropogenic GHG emission and anthropogenic removal in the second half of 21st century. This is to be achieved by countries committing to and delivering their NDC, taking into account the principles of equity, common but differentiated responsibility, and respective capabilities in different parts of the world. So the document designed to provide principles, requirements, and guidance for organization to develop, implement, and communicate a net zero aligned pathway. It covers scope 1, scope 2, and significant scope 3. Under the ISO, of course, we know there is category 1, category 2, and the rest of the category 3 to 6. In GHGP, it's scope 1, 2, and 3 across the value chain, including upstream and downstream activities. It creates 4 progressive claim stages: net aspiration, net zero aligned transition plan, net zero aligned progress, and net zero achievement. It focuses on rapid, deep, and sustained GHG reduction first, followed by residual emission are addressed through high quality carbon dioxide removal and organizational net zero. It requires science-based pathway, transition planning, governance, quantification, target actions, monitoring, reporting, and validation and verification process. Embeds equity, justice, stakeholder participation, human rights, nature, and sustainable development into the transition. The scope, status, scope, and applicability. At the moment of the circulation of the ISO 14060, it's circulated for comment and approval. It may change and may not refer to as an international standard until it's published. It applies to a wide range of public and private sector organizations, companies, corporation, partnership, NGOs, academic institutions, and others. It does not apply to territories such as regions, country, states, or city, or sector, products, services, event, brands, or claims relating to them as other standards are available. Example, for the product carbon footprint, that is ISO 14067 2018. This standard is a GHG program neutral, where if a GHG program is applicable, requirements of the GHG program are additional to the requirement of the standard. It builds from ISO Net Zero Guideline IWA 42, established in 2022 and aligned with ISO GHG quantification, reporting standards, and the greenhouse gas protocol. There are uses of some of these key terms, such as shall, which means it's a requirement to be fulfilled. Should means recommendation. May means permission, as well as the can, it provides the possibility or capability. The core concepts and terminology which is used in this document is organizational net zero, which has been described earlier. All anthropogenic GHG emission within the organization inventory are reduced to residual emission, and those residuals are counterbalanced by anthropogenic CO2 removal over a defined period. Net zero pathway, a quantified emission trajectory for achieving net zero, aligned with Paris Agreement and supported by scientific evidence. GHG budget, it's a cumulative GHG emission consistent with the organization's net zero pathway between the base year and the target year. And residual emissions, emission remaining at the net zero target date after technically and economically feasible reduction within the inventory trajectory. So the category 1 involves direct emission from source owned or controlled by the organization. In GHGP, it's called as Scope 1. Category 2 to 6 is an indirect emission from purchase of imported electricity, heating, cooling, steam, and in transportation, product used, use of products made, as well as disposal, waste disposal. The carbon credits are tradable instrument representing 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent of an emission reduction or removal enhancement. They are distinct from environmental commodity certificates. Carbon dioxide removal and storage means anthropogenic withdrawal of CO2 from the atmosphere into geological, terrestrial, ocean, or product storage. The 11 governing principles, basically it covers urgency, act rapidly to support the 1.5 degree C and achieve organizational net zero as soon as possible, high ambition, provide early, deep, rapid, and sustained reduction, supporting transition, do not use net zero alignment to perpetuate business as usual, science-based, use current science and relevant local or indigenous knowledge, update as knowledge evolves, conservativeness, avoid overstating targets, progress, assumptions or claim, avoid adverse impact, prevent or minimize environmental and social harms. Credibility, claim and methods must be capable of validation or verification. Equity and justice, fairly addresses risk, burden, and benefits, meaningfully engage with affected stakeholders. Transparency, make sufficient relevant information publicly available. Value chain and life cycle, consider emissions or removal across the whole value chain. And general robustness, apply the principles together to set net zero alignment is robust, fair, and verifiable. So these are the 11 governing principles. So the general framework which covers in clause 5 from ambition to achievement. So first is to establish the plan which involve leadership, boundaries, setting, GHG inventory, and base year determination. Second, plan based on the science-based pathways, targets, trajectory plan, and removal trajectories. Third, act. Mitigation, low carbon solutions are planned. Scope 3 action and global net zero contribution. And item 4, it's actually monitor, tracks emissions, removal indicators, track emissions and removal, indicators and identify gaps for continuous improvement. Fifth, reporting annually, providing transparency and evidence-based reporting, assurance and claim. The findings can be validated or verified and make only the claim stage supported by the evidence. So in terms of the mitigation hierarchy, prioritize on the reduction within the GHG inventory boundaries. So can refer to clause 5.2. The prioritize CO2 removal action within the organizational boundary over CO2 removal elsewhere, where feasible. Carbon credit cannot be used to claim progress towards interim or net zero GHG emission reduction targets, clause 5.4. So some of these clauses, I think the participant can actually refer for details when making comments, whether it's achievable or not. So reference to clause 6, which covers the governance, leadership, and accountability. The top management is accountable for achieving and demonstrating organizational net zero and for related claims. The corporate strategy, policies, targets, actions, investment, and resource allocation must be aligned with net zero commitments. The leadership also must assign competence and responsibility to employees, provide adequate financial, human and technical resources, and prioritize transition action across the organization. The net zero pathway and transition plan must be reviewed at planned intervals and at least annually, and develop remedial actions where necessary. Organization shall integrate climate risk indicators and controls, making core risk management, and consider embedding net zero targets in governance documents. Governance extend beyond the organizational engagement with suppliers, customers, and stakeholders, and policymakers are expected to support the transition. There is a question related to the 11 governing principles. It's actually covered in the clause 4. Referring to the clause 7 and 8, where the boundary, GHG inventory, and quantification are discussed, the boundary settings documents the GHG inventory, boundaries for quantification, target setting, pathway setting, planning, action and monitoring, and reporting. It includes all scope 1, scope 2, and significant scope 3 emissions. For annual quantification, the emissions are quantified and removal as well as quantified annually using ISO 14061-1 or applicable GHGP standards. Use consistent methods and credible country or region specific or measured emission factor where available. The data quality. Assess uncertainties and continuously improve completeness and quality of the data. Increase primary, supplier specific, and locality specific data where possible. For the base year, establish a representative, verifiable inventory and document a review or recalculate the procedure when needed. For scope 2, it shall use location-based quantification for imported energy, may account and report GHG emission for scope 2 based on market-based emissions. Market-based approach, sorry. For scope 3, all scope 3 is considered in the long-term pathway. Targets are required for significant categories based on magnitude, influence, and secondary significance criteria. Exclusion, it must be justified and publicly disclosed. Significant exclude source may still require activity targets and mitigation activities. For transition planning, what the plan must contain. It must be based on reliable, quantified data and integrate into core business planning, financial planning, and budgeting. Must cover direct emission or scope 1, indirect emission or scope 2, significant other emissions or scope 3, and anticipate residual emission with action timelines linked to targets. It must address stakeholders' participation, social or environmental impacts, climate-related dependencies, and risk of emission outside of inventory boundaries. Must apply how emission and mitigation measures will be quantified, monitored, reported, and validated or verified. Must explain planned use of carbon credit for global net zero contribution and how the organization will build capacity for future residual emission counterbalancing. It must be documented, publicly available, updated at least every 5 years and wherever necessary. The governance of finance content includes strategic alignment, investment or divestment, cash flow implication, resources, roles, capability building, and value chain engagement. Clause 10 address the science-based target and net zero pathway, which involves, example, the eligible sector pathway includes those developed from IPCC 1.5 degree C special report. The IA report Net Zero 2050 provides a framework for development of sectoral transition set a long-term target for all its energy, indirect GHG emissions or scope 2 using location-based approach described in ISO 14064-1 or GHGP scope 2 guidance 2015 for quantification. The organization shall set interim targets for consuming low carbon energy for its operation across the locations where it consumes imported energy. So the pathway selection uses a pathway consistent with Paris Agreement, temperature goals appropriate to sector and regions, independently developed, peer-reviewed or reviewed, transparent and scientifically feasible. And GHG budget for scope 1 establish organizational GHG budget using peer-reviewed allocations method. Cumulative emission should remain within the organizational budget. Separate targets are required for scope 1, scope 2 and significant scope 3 emissions, in which indirect emission or scope 2 requires long-term target uses a location-based approach. Interim low-carbon energy targets may use market-based instruments subject to integrity requirement. Scope 3, primary criteria using magnitude and influence approach, where the magnitude, the indirect emission or scope 3 emissions that are determined to be quantitatively substantial, whereas the influence are actually the emission that the organization has the ability to influence, monitor, help to reduce, includes emission from suppliers, other organizations which they have contract or commercial relationship. The secondary criteria includes risk or opportunity, sector guidance, outsourcing activities, and employee-generated emission. Here, the risk and opportunity includes the other indirect emission or scope 3 emission that expose the organization to physical or transitional risk or create opportunities for businesses. Activity target should support implementation, energy efficient, fossil fuel transition, no deforestation in its own operation, supply chain engagement, nature restoration, and other global net zero actions. Residual emission must be assessed for technical or economic feasibility. Deviation from the pathway recovers documentation justifications as well as planned adjustment. So in clause 10.3, there are further guidance on feasibility analysis, which it includes the documentation and assessment. So the technical feasibility is why further reduction aren't technically feasible, including available solutions and a comparison against durable carbon dioxide removal. For economic feasibility, why the available financial resources are insufficient to reduce residual emission any further. And the last is the equity and justice, how the organization's net zero pathway and anticipated residual emission align with equity and justice principle. If deviation from this estimated net zero pathway, the organization shall update its transition plan, restate anticipated residual emission, and revise its carbon dioxide removal milestones. Again, in clause 10.3, for just transition, nature, and wider impact, the equity and justice, the organization should consider differing capacity and historical responsibility. Larger capability organizations should collaborate with those with less capacity to act. The human rights and community. Engage affected stakeholders inclusively, support decent work, reskilling, social protection, and remediation. Respect indigenous people's rights, including EPIC where applicable. Nature and SDG. Consider biodiversity, ecosystems, forests, soil, wetland, water, ocean, poverty, prosperity, and human rights along climate actions. Mitigation actions must avoid or minimize adverse environmental and social impact. Organization must anticipate, assess, and address stakeholders' risk and opportunity arising from climate action. Policy advocacy should be aligned with Paris Agreement and the organization's own net zero pathway. Material Trade Association policy misalignment should be disclosed. Wider impact and policy engagement form part of the annual reporting architecture. Guidance on residual emission. In alignment with the concept of net zero, residual emission is defined as anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission remaining at net zero target date after implementation of all technical and economically feasible activity to reduce greenhouse gas emission within an organization's GHG inventory boundary. ISO 14060 allows organizations to use underlying global, sectoral or national net zero pathway that is appropriate for sector and regions, developed by independent third party taking account of climate science. Residual emission initially estimate through top-down from its selected GHG emission reduction pathway. For net zero, residual emissions are determined bottom-up, as those emissions cannot be eliminated. If the organization does not expect to eliminate all emission by its net zero target date or align with the net zero pathway for its sector, it shall provide a feasibility analysis, which was explained earlier, explaining the reason for these residual emissions. This should include analysis at any deviation from the anticipated residual emission based on the science-based pathway used to set targets. For clause 11, the net zero action includes the reduction first at the organizational level. So to implement the transition plan, do not delay action simply because data are incomplete. Use reasonable estimates or proxy metrics while improving quantification. Improve energy efficiency and reduce energy-related emissions through operational optimization, technology upgrades, and low-carbon energy deployment. Address Scope 3 through product or service redesign, circularity, sustainable consumer choices, and collaborate with suppliers and customers. Fourth, environmental commodity certificates can support scaling low carbon products or technologies where direct procurement is not yet feasible but cannot substitute for emission reduction. Organizations with relevant products or services should develop climate solutions that enable others to reduce emission. Avoided emission must be reported separately from Scope 1 to 3 reductions. Organizations should use climate finance, policy engagement, and partnership to contribute to global net zero beyond their own inventories. Clause 11.3 addresses taking action for the global net zero, which covers the climate solution. Products and services help others cut emissions. Avoided emission reported separately. Climate finance portfolio, allocate finance for climate actions. Disclose its value against remaining annual GHG emissions. Policy engagement, if an organization engaged in policy or public advocacy relevant to climate action, either directly or indirectly through association, trade, alliance, coalition, charity, or think tank, it shall work to align this with global transition in line with the goals of Paris Agreement, its own target, and the policy needed to achieve it. Empowerment of community, empower and consult with workers and affected communities, provide remedial process for affected groups. Sustainable Development Goals shall consider alignment with UN SDGs and with UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So clause 12 talks about counterbalancing residual emission with CO2 removal. At organizational net zero, residual emission must be counterbalanced with high quality, durable CO2 removal equivalent to greater than the residual emissions. During the transition, organization must estimate anticipated residual emission and establish removal milestones, beginning no later than 5 years after setting targets. Emission reduction or avoidance credit cannot be used to counterbalance residual emission. At net zero, the organization must continue annual counterbalancing and remain at least at net zero. It should continue reducing residual emission through innovation and transformation. For removal quality criteria, it must be durable, additional, quantified, no carbon leakage, not counted or used or claimed by more than one organization, and credibly accounted. For net zero counterbalancing, storage is expected to have at least 100 years of durability, or risk management mechanism must ensure the 100 years requirement. Removal quantification must account for associated upstream or downstream emission. Accredited verification is required before carbon credit issuance. Monitoring, reporting, and continual improvement as per clause 13 and 14. For monitoring, regularly compare GHG emissions, removal, and target metrics against the base year and pathway. Identify under or overperformance and gaps. Improve and adjustment. Update targets and plans where estimate underperform occurs. Incorporate new sciences, pathway changes or best practices and lessons learned. Report annually. Publicly and quantitative progress at least annually with complete, consistent accuracy, relevant and transparent information. Annual reporting should cover the reporting scope, period, the reporting period, base, interim or net zero year, quantification, standard, inventory, boundary, and latest inventories. Disclose scope 2 using both location-based and market-based approach where applicable. Explain scope 3 exclusion and validation or verification results. Report new initiatives, wider social or environmental impact, and climate policy advocacy. Progress reporting should show emissions by scope or by type, targets and removal milestone progress, GHG budget, difficulties and anticipated residual emission and assurance activity. Reports must disclose limitations, exclusions, proxy or data gaps, and uncertainty in achievement must not be overstated. Clause 16 covers the 4 stages claim framework and validation and verification process. So for the first claim is aspiration. Started the process. The organization has started the process, commit to set a net zero target and publish a transition path plan or pathway. It has to be done within the 2 years. And move to the transition plan, has GHG inventory, pathways, target and transition plan, commits to implement the plan. It's allowed for the up to 5 years. And next, followed with the progress claim, demonstrate progress and meet interim targets or takes permitted or remedial action. So these claims, this is actually done every 5 years. And the last achievement has achieved net zero balance and maintain it through annual counterbalancing and reporting. This to be done every year. Claims must be evidence-based, comparable over time, consistent with public reporting, and clearly identify the claim stages and limitations. Validation concerns future projections or assumptions, whereas verification concerns about historical data or results. The first, second, or third-party assurance is permitted, but third-party validation or verification is recognized as more credible and may be legally required in some jurisdictions. Existing net zero or carbon neutral or climate positive target generally move on organizations directly towards stage 2 rather than stage 1. Avoided emission cannot be included as progress towards scope 1, 2 or 3 reduction targets. In clause 16, it also describes what happens when an organization misses its target. A missed interim target does not automatically end the pathway. The organization may qualify for an adjustment or remedial period if the relevant requirements are met. The organization must publicly explain the deviation, the reasons, and the remedial measures and timeline for returning to the pathway. The transition plan and where necessary, the pathway and removal trajectory must be updated. After achieving net zero, if emission rise above residual level or removals fail or reverse, the organization must promptly acknowledge loss of status, explain the reasons, address excess emission with durable removals, and report annually on recovery process. If the organization cannot return to net zero status within 3 years, it must stop using the net zero claim until it can make an appropriate verified claims again. So the core principles here is transparency, plus corrective actions are preferred to preserving a claim through unsupported accounting. So the remedial action for the missed target is if a company misses an interim target, a bounded adjustment of remedial period up to 3 years allows it to return to its pathway subject to mandatory disclosure. So the adjustment period stays within when scope 1 is within the plan of the carbon budget but has missed scope 2 or 3 or both by not more than 25% may maintain progress claim. Whereas for remedial period, missed scope 1 carbon budget or overshoot scope 2 or 3 by more than 25%. So for the why remedial action matters is it keeps published claims accurate over time, recognizes real world business reality and growth trajectories, provide a structured grace period paired with concrete corrective actions. Now moving to the Annex A, because there probably could be an interest related to the SMA. So the guidance, so the document provide guidance for small and medium-sized enterprises. So Annex A recognizes that SMEs may initially lack the time, resources, expertise, and capability to meet the full requirement. It provides guidance on SME status, difficult requirements, and approaches SME may consider instead. The annex does not create a reduced conformity basis for making claims, and SME unable to fulfill the necessary requirements cannot use the annex as a basis for claiming conformity. SME status is not prescribed universally. Organizations should use their local, legal or regulatory definitions where available. Otherwise, consider employees' annual turnover or asset under management. A qualifying SME must be an independent legal entity. Subsidiary of larger entity are not treated as SME for these purposes. The annex can also help larger companies understand challenges faced by SMEs in their supply chain. As a key takeaway for organizations in meeting the ISO 14060, the net zero is a pathway, it's not a label. The draft links claims to measurable prerequisites, targets, actions, reporting, and assurance. Reduction comes first. Carbon credits and removal do not replace the requirement to reduce organizational emissions. Scope 3 matters. Significant value chain emission must be identified, targeted, and addressed using both emissions and activity measures. Governance is substantive. Board or top management, finance, risk, resources, incentives, stakeholders engagement, and policy alignment are part of the transition. Integrity is built into CDR. Durability, additionality, quantification, leakages prevention, single-use accounting, and independent verifications are central. Finally, the transparency protects credibility. Annual public reporting and corrective actions are required when performance deviates from the pathway. So basically, these are the summaries. What we have provided here is to give a reference to what's in the document, and based on that, the comments should or recommendations should be provided. Thank you. I will pass back to the MC.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Yang Berusaha Teknologis Perubahan Eswari Ramasamy atas pembentangan sebentar tadi. Seterusnya, hadirin sekalian, sebelum kita melabuhkan tirai, majlis ini menjemput Yang Berusaha Profesor Madya Dr. Zelina Zaitun Ibrahim untuk menyampaikan penerangan ringkas berkenaan best practices for comments. Sesi ini adalah sangat penting bagi memudahkan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan untuk mengemukakan maklum balas dan ulasan teknikal terhadap dokumen ISO DIS 14060. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Profesor Madya Dr. Zelina Zaitun untuk membentangkan penerangan ringkas beliau. Majlis mempersilakan.
Okay, terima kasih mengucapkan pada Tuan Pengerusi Majlis. So here I'd just like to give some guidance about how, sorry, a little bit technical things. Okay, here we go. So terima kasih. Just getting our slides up. So when you're doing comments, please take a look at the document, take a look at the line numbers and page, as well as the clause title before you provide comments, because we need these details inside the commenting template. So let's give an example of a comment. Okay, within the form itself, you see some columns. The first one is the line number. So take a look at the line number to write down, because otherwise we don't know what sentence you are making your comments on. There'll be a clause and section, so place down the clause. And it might be a paragraph within that, or a sentence, or it might be a figure or table that you wish to refer to. So here I'm giving two comments. Actually, this was derived from comments which had been provided by national members, but I've changed it, of course, in the context. So one of the comments, you see there's a comment and a proposed change column. In this case, in the first one, we have a comment: how are organizations developing an awareness of climate change and net zero for their clients? So if you were somebody, an expert working on the document, when you look at this question, you'll be asking, what do I have to do? It's not, it's asking me a question rather than making any comment about a technical issue. So, and there is no proposed change. Sorry, this doesn't come with line numbers. Okay. Sorry, so here please go to the page number instead of line number. Please note the page number. And then on the page, please put down the subclause and which paragraph it is within the clause. Sorry, I'm more used to the old style of the document where it comes with line numbers on every page. Strange. Okay, so normally my best practice would be I would actually put the sentence in. So put the sentence within the comment itself and then make a proposed change. So you see in this top row, there is a comment, but there is no proposed change. So normally what would happen is I would look at this comment and said, okay, this is a good comment. I'm not going to do anything with it. There's no proposed change. It could be that the committee is very generous and then they will say, okay, how do we address this comment? Okay. But in this case, without a proposed change, if committee is very busy, they will say, okay, I'll take note of your comment, but I'm not going to do anything about it. The second comment below, the document has too many shall requirements, which is something that you might say about this document. And it says some shalls also include several lists of items, which also must be fulfilled. It's very difficult. So this could be something that you make a comment of, and you said, reduce the number of requirements. But then I will look at this also and said, which requirements does this person ask me to reduce? So this also is I would say, an incomplete comment to ask me to do something. You need to write a comment so that it is very difficult to say no to doing the action you would like them to do. So how can we improve this comment? So let's take a look at a similar type of comment. So here we have the awareness. Instead of a question, we just say climate change awareness and net zero is important for clients so that they can understand the actions that we have to take or that we have to ask them to do. And then we make a proposal for a change. Sorry, I think I have this not so good way to comment should actually change to a better way to comment. So apologies for that. So here the proposed change would be proposed to add a sentence in this section, and then I actually provide the sentence. Organizations should take action, and here, as you remember, Ms. Buvar mentioned about should is a recommendation. You could say, I want all organizations to do something, and then you would write, organization shall take action to provide training or information for clients on the actions taken. If you just say you want to recommend that they do it, then you will say organization should do this. It would be a good practice. And what about the second comment below? The document has too many shall requirements. Some shalls include several lists of items which must also be fulfilled. It's very difficult to apply. But then I make an additional suggestion, suggest to reduce requirements to only the most important. But that is incomplete also because I should make a proposed change to say, based on, and then maybe I give industry practice, I give some other standards, or I give some article which says these are the most important requirements, and I actually list them. So I say the first one is this, the second one is this, the third one is this. So I make very concrete proposals for change. And then it is very difficult for the committee to say, why do I have to do this? Because you've given them very specific actions to be taken. So the more specific your suggestions for proposed change, the better is your comment. And sometimes if I ask people to make a change to a sentence, in the comment, I will actually write out the sentence. I will make my argument and justification. And then in the proposed change, I'll say, please change the sentence to, and then I will provide them a sentence. Or you could say, maybe this wording is not correct. You can say, change to this or similar. So that would be a very good way of making a comment. So it is important to make sure that you make a comment. It is substantive. It is some important component. And I would suggest, since the document is very long, that you look first at all the shalls because these are requirements you must do. Should, as Ms. Buvar also mentioned, is recommended. You don't have to do it, but if I'm an auditor, I will come and say, oh, this is an opportunity for improvement, the next stage, okay? But if it is a may, it's up to you. You can choose to do it or not do it. And you could do it, but it's not really very important. So understand the hierarchy of requirements. Shall is wajib, mesti, must do. Should is good to do if you have it, okay? And then may and can fall lower down the hierarchy. So check in the document whether you are able to fulfill or not and what the implications will be for your organization when you're making the comments. And all of your comments will be taken up by the committee and consolidated to provide national feedback. So thank you very much for your input, and we really look forward to all the comments that you can provide for us. You might also, within the form, ask us questions, and we will try to answer your substantive questions within the next few days so that you may clear up any doubts or uncertainties you might have. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah, majlis kita telah sampai ke penghujungnya. Sebagai peringatan terakhir, komen dan ulasan terhadap dokumen ISO DIS 14060 boleh dikemukakan melalui borang komen yang disediakan di dalam pautan Google Form dan hendaklah dihantar selewat-lewatnya pada 25 Ogos 2026. Puan-puan juga digalakkan untuk subscribe saluran YouTube rasmi Jabatan Standard Malaysia bagi mengikuti perkembangan serta video-video terkini yang disediakan dari semasa ke semasa. Peringatan sekali lagi, mungkin ada yang terlepas pandang, komen dan ulasan untuk dokumen ISO DIS 140 boleh didapati melalui borang komen yang disediakan pada ruangan chat box, dan komen tersebut adalah Google Form, dan tuan-puan hendaklah menghantar selewat-lewatnya pada 25 Ogos 2026. Saya mewakili pihak Jabatan Standard Malaysia ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada semua hadirin yang hadir pada sesi webinar dan memohon maaf jika terdapat sebarang kekurangan dan kekhilafan sepanjang mengendalikan sesi konsultasi ini. Sekian, terima kasih dan berjumpa lagi di program akan datang. Assalamualaikum.